All right, here we are at section P. This is the items included and excluded section. Uh, you'll notice that bathroom mirrors is permanently checked here. Uh, so if the bathroom mirrors are some special mirror that is going to be taken with the seller and it's not going to remain at the property, it's some kind of personal item or the seller is going to remove it, you would need to specifically excluded. I think the reason for that is when these new mirrors came out, the nice lit up mirrors, touch mirrors, that kind of thing. Sellers were taking them just like they were taking ring doorbells and other items. Understand that in general, if an item is affixed to the property, it's bolted on, it's attached with glue, it's those items are considered part of the real property, just as trees that are planted in the yard, all plants that are in the ground are part of that real property. If your seller wants to hang on to a plant because it has sentimental value, or they say, hey, we're going to be taking that sago palm with us, you're going to want to have that conversation with your seller during the listing presentation, and you're going to let them know that their intention of taking that can be overridden by what's in this purchase agreement. So my recommendation is anything that the seller isn't willing to keep with the property, they go ahead and remove beforehand so that we're showing the property the way it's going to be delivered to the buyer, as close as possible. So typical things is that stoves, ovens, maybe refrigerators are included. If there's, if you were asking for a washer and dryer, we'd check those boxes. A lot of times microwaves might be built in to a stove hood. Wall-mounted brackets. This would be typical for televisions. If they're not leaving the TV, but you want them to not remove the mounting brackets because it's going to look ugly and jack up the drywall. You're going to want to check this. If they have security systems, so all these things, if the box is checked, that means that that's included with the property. Video doorbells, I would probably check that. Basically anything that the property has that you want to remain with the property. If there's something that is attached to the property and the seller has, maybe in the agent notes, they say, seller is reserving the hallway chandelier and will be removing it prior to close of escrow. You would put that in here, hallway chandelier. I think that's how you spell chandelier. You'd put that in here as an item that's being excluded. All right. Section Q, allocation of costs. This is who's paying for what. Typically, the seller is going to pay for an NHD because the seller has the legal obligation to provide the information about that is on an NHD. So usually the seller is going to pay for this report. You can put in here who it's going to be provided by. You can pick someone, or you can type it in. So typically the seller is going to pay for that. Optional wildfire disclosure report. If this is an additional report that's being provided, understand that if these items are not selected here, it doesn't mean that report can't be purchased or that your buyer can't get that report. The language says that the buyer is open to do whatever investigation they want during their investigation time period. This is just if you're asking for something to be paid for by the seller, then you're probably going to want to put it in here so that the seller knows right up front that they need to order that report. All right. So typical things to ask the seller for is government required point of sale items, corrective remedial things. In our area, typically, smoke detectors, bracing, that kind of stuff. If we're asking for our seller to pay for a pest inspection, we can put that in here. Understand that even if we don't ask for the seller to pay for or provide that pest inspection, that does not preclude us from getting the inspection and then later having a request for repair. So you don't have to put it in here. Understand that if you do put in here a pest inspection and you're asking for the seller to pay for it, that the lender is going to see this document and the lender is going to require that. They're going to want to see that pest inspection and see the clearance. If you don't put it in here, you can still order one, and then you can still ask for items to be taken care of. This is just if you want the seller to pay for it, or maybe you're paying for it yourself. So this is where you put all this. Escrow fee. Oftentimes, if you ask for the seller to pay for the escrow fee, you would that you're probably going to put in here that it's going to be seller's choice for the escrow company, and same thing here, you'd probably put seller's choice. But you don't have to select that. You could say that the buyer and seller are both going to pay. Oftentimes you will see both, or each to pay. I've seen where people will check box and they'll put something like 50% and 50%. People will put this in here. Other times I'll see agents just check each to pay their own fees. If you're representing the buyer and it's important to your buyer that who the escrow company be or who the title company be, you're going to put that in here. So that could be, I don't know, let's put, I don't know, First American. Could be the escrow holder. Maybe they're each going to pay their own, and maybe the owner's title insurance you're asking for the seller to pay, but you want that to be with, I don't know, USA title. So you'd fill this out. Buyer's lender, title insurance policy, that's got the buyer paying for it unless otherwise agreed. Buyer shall purchase any title insurance policy insuring buyer's lender. So this is like PMI type stuff. County tax transfer taxes, city transfer taxes. Understand, depending on where the property is located, you might not have county transfer taxes. You might not have city transfer taxes, but it doesn't hurt. Let's say you're asking the seller to pay these. If one of these doesn't exist, it doesn't matter. The seller won't have to pay that. HOA transfer fees. You could, once again, you could check both and say 50-50. It really doesn't matter. Oftentimes I see most offers, buyers usually asking for the seller to pay for all of this stuff. Private transfer fees, you don't see that often anymore. I know Lennar Homes used to have some, but you could check who's paying that. The default is seller in this case. If there's any other fee or cost that's kind of outside the normal, I don't know, maybe you are getting like, I don't know, septic pump fees, then you could say that you want the seller to pay for that. And then home warranty, this is a big one. Oftentimes it's up to the buyer to pay for their own home warranty. You can ask the seller, but they're just going to look at that as another cost. But oftentimes it's the buyer paying for their home warranty. You'd select who you're getting it through. I'll just pick one at random. Make sure when you fill this out, so this is, if the buyer's paying for it, you don't have to fill this out. But if you're asking the seller to provide it, then this is the upper limit of what the seller's paying. So if you put $600 in here, but the buyer's home warranty actually ended up costing $700, then the seller's not going to pay more than the $600 towards it, and the buyer would have to make up the difference. Okay. Over here's where you could put any coverage, additional coverage, such as, pool, spa, pool, spa, and then if they're, any additional coverage that you're getting under the home warranty. If they're not getting one, or if you don't fill this out, it does not prevent your buyer from getting one. But if you're asking for the seller to pay in any way, then you need to fill this section out. All right. R is for other terms. This is a spot to write in things that are going to pertain to this. Before you put any language in here, please double check with me. It's kind of a bad idea to start putting your own custom language into these contracts, because everything written in here was written by high-paid attorneys that know what they're doing. You can create problems, or you can write unenforceable terms in here. What we used to see in here is kind of disclosures like buyer's agent is related to principal, something, you'd see, wait a second, that's like principal of a school, right? No, that's right, principal. You'd see language like this. But now that we have that new RAD form, we don't need to use it for that. Buyer. This was typically used for disclosure purposes, but the better way to do that is to use the CAR form provided. So that's it. We've completed everything up through page 3. So the next video, I'm going to start on section 4, which starts on page 4.